What if the man who had everything, wealth, power, and the quietest penthouse in Seattle, discovered that the only force strong enough to shatter his silence was the sight of a little girl cradling a starving infant and begging for leftovers in the glow of a restaurant he thought would keep the world away? If stories of redemption, healing, and unexpected family touch your heart, please like and subscribe so you can stay with us until the very last chapter of this journey. The rain had stopped only an hour earlier, leaving the streets of Belltown slick with silver reflections. Lumiere, one of Seattle's most discreet fine dining restaurants, glowed behind its glass facade like a lantern against the wet night. Inside, the tables were set with stemmed crystal, heavy linen, and the quiet hum of a jazz trio tucked in the corner. It was the kind of place where waiters moved like shadows, and no one raised their voice above a murmur. Evan Whitaker sat alone at his corner table, the same one he had requested every Friday for nearly a year. 38 years old, CEO of Whitaker Dynamics, he looked as if the city itself had been carved into him. Precise suit, silver tie clip, a posture that spoke of meetings that could tilt stock markets. In front of him, a plate of halibut sat barely touched. For 12 months he had returned to Lumiere not for the food, but because it was the last place he had ever dined with his daughter before the accident. The candlelight flickered against the rim of his untouched glass of Pinot Gris. His eyes did not follow the room, but lingered inward, fixed on absences no one else could see. The restaurant doors opened with a faint chime. Most of the diners did not look up. Evan did. And in that single glance, his world shifted. A girl, no older than 8, stood just inside the threshold, hair damp from the misty night. In her thin arms, she carried a baby swaddled in a blanket that looked more like a torn scarf. The infant's head lolled against her shoulder, cheeks hollow, lips pale. She scanned the tables not with the curiosity of a child, but with the desperation of someone too familiar with rejection. Evan's fork froze midair. The maitre d' approached quickly, whispering in alarm, but the girl beat him to it. She took 3 steps forward, tightened her hold on the baby, and spoke with a voice that trembled yet held an eerie steadiness. "Please, do you have any leftovers? My brother hasn't eaten." The jazz trio seemed to falter, a note breaking off as if even the music leaned closer. Conversations stilled. In the hush, Evan realized the girl was looking directly at him. For the first time in months, something pierced through his grief-hardened chest. He cleared his throat, his voice rusty. "What's your name?" "Mia," she answered quickly, then lowered her eyes as though ashamed to speak too loudly in such a place. "And this is Aiden. He's only 6 months. He needs milk." The maitre d' began to usher her out, muttering about decorum, but Evan raised a hand, stopping him. The authority in his gesture silenced the room. "Bring infant formula," Evan said, turning toward the startled waiter. "And pureed vegetables. Something soft. Now." The waiter nodded and hurried off. Mia stood frozen, unsure whether to flee or trust. Evan gestured gently. "Sit," he said. "Please. He should eat first." A chair was pulled beside his table. Mia lowered herself, rocking the baby with practiced, fragile motions. When the bottle arrived, she fumbled with the cap until Evan reached over, his steady hands finishing the task. He passed the warmed formula to her. Aiden latched greedily, tiny fists curling against the bottle. The sound of his swallowing filled the silence, louder than the jazz, louder than the clink of glasses. Mia's shoulders sagged with relief. Evan watched as the girl held the bottle with both hands, refusing to sip from the plate of bread placed near her until the baby was full. She brushed his cheek with her thumb, whispering words too soft to catch. Her eyes glistened, but she blinked hard, determined not to cry. Something inside Evan cracked. For 12 months he had managed to remain stone, locking his grief away where no one could touch it. Yet here, at a corner table in Lumiere, watching an 8-year-old give her brother everything before herself, the first tear slipped down his face. It traced a slow line across skin that had grown too familiar with coldness. He turned away, embarrassed at the weight of emotion in public. But Mia saw. She looked at him curiously, as though sensing the pain behind his tailored armor. "You okay, mister?" she asked softly, her voice carrying both suspicion and kindness. Evan cleared his throat. "I will be." He forced the words, unsure if he believed them. The waiter returned with a bowl of mashed potatoes and carrots. Mia hesitated until Evan pushed the plate toward her. "Eat," he said. "He's safe now. You should eat too." Her small hands clutched the spoon. She ate cautiously, eyes darting as though the food might be taken away. Evan noticed the bruising shadows beneath her eyes, the tremor in her wrists. She had carried not just her brother, but the entire weight of survival. The night stretched around them, the restaurant fading into the background. Diners pretended not to stare. Evan no longer cared. He was watching something raw, something holy. An older sister giving away her childhood to keep a baby alive. And with each bite Mia took, with each breath Aiden drew, Evan felt the walls around his heart weaken. For the first time since his daughter's death, he was not thinking about what he had lost. He was thinking about what could still be saved. The night after Lumiere, Evan Whitaker returned to his penthouse overlooking South Lake Union. He lay in a bed far too large for one man, the city's skyline glowing faintly through tall glass windows. Sleep rarely came easily anymore. When it did, it often dragged him into places he wasn't prepared to go. That night, as rain whispered against the glass, he dreamed. He was standing on the deck of a ferry moving across Elliott Bay. The water shimmered like black silk beneath a veil of starlight. A gull wheeled overhead, its cry sharp as glass. And then, her voice, clear, bright, impossibly familiar. "Daddy?" His daughter. The one he had lost a year ago, her laughter silenced in an instant on a road wet with rain. She stood before him now, not in the broken way memory often delivered her, but whole, hair blowing in the breeze, eyes like summer skies. She reached out her hand. "There are children who need you right now," she said. "Don't turn away." He reached for her, but found only mist. The ferry's horn sounded, long and mournful, pulling him awake. Evan sat up, chest heaving, the city lights pressing in. He could still hear her voice, still feel the plea vibrating through his bones. His hands trembled as he poured water from the carafe by his bedside. He stared into the glass but saw only the girl from Lumiere, Mia, holding her infant brother like a soldier guarding the last treasure of a ruined kingdom. Sleep abandoned him. By dawn, Evan had already made a decision. At 7 a.m., Lumiere's front door clicked open, long before the restaurant welcomed its usual clientele. Sophia Park, the head chef, was already there. Hair tied back, apron slung over her shoulder, a stack of invoices in her hands. She was surprised to see Evan waiting at one of the polished wooden tables, a coffee untouched before him. "Mr. Whitaker?" she asked cautiously. "I thought you'd have been halfway to your office by now." Evan looked up. The exhaustion in his eyes was framed by something else. Resolve. "I need your help," he said simply. Sophia set down her papers. "Is this about last night? The little girl?" He nodded. "Mia. And her brother Aiden. They're out there somewhere. I can't stop thinking about them." Sophia folded her arms, leaning against the chair across from him. "Seattle is a big city. Children disappear into the cracks. I've seen them near Pike Place under the viaduct." Sometimes they come for scraps. Then we start with what we know, Evan said. His voice carried the tone of a man used to moving mountains, though this mountain was unfamiliar, unyielding. She couldn't have gone far, not with an infant. Last night was cold. They must have sought shelter close by. Sophia studied him. She had worked at Lumiere for 7 years, seen men of power dine and vanish into their worlds. But this was different. This was the first time she had seen Evan Whitaker speak with urgency that wasn't tied to mergers or stock prices. "I'll help," she said quietly. "But this isn't the kind of search you can throw money at. You'll have to walk the streets." "Then I'll walk," Evan replied. By late morning, they were combing through Belltown. Rain clouds lingered, pressing low over the streets. They passed doorways where men slept under damp blankets, alleys where the smell of stale beer clung to the bricks. Sophia greeted a few faces with nods of recognition. She was known for occasionally handing out containers of soup when the kitchen had surplus. They asked quietly, had anyone seen a little girl carrying a baby? Some shook their heads. Some muttered yes, but with no details. The trail was fragile, like smoke. Finally, near a shuttered department store at the edge of 3rd Avenue, Sophia stopped. Her eyes narrowed. "There," she whispered. Under the store's recessed entryway, curled into the angle where the concrete met the glass, was a bundle of fabric. As they approached, the bundle shifted. A small head lifted. Mia. Her eyes widened when she saw them. She pressed Aiden closer to her chest as if shielding him from harm. His tiny breaths rattled audibly, each exhale a weak, congested whistle. Evan knelt immediately, lowering himself to her level. "It's me," he said softly. "From the restaurant." Mia's lips trembled. She looked at Sophia, then back at Evan. "We didn't mean trouble," she whispered. "He just needs a place that's warm." Evan's throat constricted. He could hear the strain in Aiden's breathing, see the bluish tinge around his nose. Instinct roared inside him, the same protective force he had once known as a father. "You're not in trouble," he said firmly. "But he can't stay out here. Not another night." Mia clutched the baby tighter. "People say shelters take babies away. I can't lose him. I can't." Her words cracked like glass under pressure. Sophia crouched beside Evan, her voice gentle. "We don't want to take him from you. We just want to help. You'll stay together, I promise." Mia's eyes searched theirs, hunting for deceit. Children on the street learn too quickly whom to trust. Finally, with a shudder, she allowed Evan to reach for the blanket. He felt Aiden's warmth, feverish, damp with sweat. The baby's small chest rose and fell in shallow rhythm. Evan gathered them both with surprising ease, the baby in his arms, Mia clutching his sleeve. The rain started again, a fine drizzle that slicked the sidewalks. He looked at Sophia. "Call Dr. Harris," he ordered. "Tell her I'm bringing in a 6-month-old underweight respiratory distress." Sophia nodded, already dialing. As they moved toward his car, Mia walked stiffly beside him, torn between relief and fear. She kept glancing up, her eyes wide, her voice breaking on a single plea. "Please don't let them take him." Evan stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. The city moved around them, indifferent. He bent slightly, meeting her gaze. "I won't," he promised. His voice carried a conviction that startled even him. "You both come with me. Tonight you're not sleeping on the street." Mia blinked rapidly, as though bracing for disappointment. When none came, she nodded once, fiercely, like a soldier accepting a command. Together, they walked through the drizzle, toward the car, toward South Lake Union, toward something none of them could yet name. South Lake Union shimmered with neon that night, the water beyond Evan Whitaker's penthouse reflecting fractured colors. His home, a fortress of glass and steel designed to impress investors and colleagues, had never been a place for children. Yet here he was, carrying a feverish infant into the foyer, followed closely by a wide-eyed 8-year-old whose shoes squeaked nervously on the polished floor. The silence of the house was deafening. Evan set Aiden gently onto the wide leather sofa, then turned toward Mia, who stood clutching the straps of her torn backpack as though it were armor. "Stay close," he said quietly. She nodded, shifting from one foot to the other, her eyes darting around the cavernous room. The tall ceilings and minimalist furniture looked more like a museum than a home. For her, raised in alleys and doorways, the space felt alien. She hugged herself tighter. Evan moved quickly, his businesslike efficiency turning to urgency. He had called Dr. Emily Harris from Seattle Children's Hospital while driving. Within the hour, she arrived at the door, coat still damp from the drizzle, medical bag in hand. "Mr. Whitaker?" she greeted briskly. "This way." Evan guided her to the sofa where Aiden stirred weakly. Dr. Harris knelt, her stethoscope already in place. She worked with practiced calm, weighing, measuring, listening to the rattle of the baby's lungs. She took a small vial of blood with a deft hand. When she finished, she sat back on her heels, her expression grave. "He's underweight for 6 months, malnourished, moderately anemic, with signs of early respiratory stress. If he doesn't receive stable care, he could fall into failure to thrive." The words struck the air like a hammer. Mia's face drained of color. "Failure?" "Doctor." Harris softened her tone. "It means his body won't grow the way it should. But with consistent nutrition and monitoring, it's reversible." Evan's jaw tightened. "Then he'll get what he needs here." Dr. Harris looked at him carefully. "Formula, feeding schedule, medical oversight, all non-negotiable. And Mr. Whitaker, unless you establish legal guardianship, Child Protective Services will intervene." At the mention of CPS, Mia's breath hitched. She pulled Aiden closer. "They'll take him away." "Please, don't let them." Her plea cracked something in Evan. He crouched down, meeting her frightened gaze. "No one is taking him tonight, not while he's here." Mia searched his face, as though trying to gauge whether promises meant anything in a world that had broken everyone she'd known. Dr. Harris packed her bag but left behind a folder. "Track his feedings every ounce. Wet diapers, sleep cycles. Bring him in weekly. If you do that and he shows progress, my reports may help." After she left, silence crept back into the vast living room. Aiden whimpered, rooting against the blanket. "He's hungry," Mia whispered. "He always cries like that when he needs milk." Evan scanned the pristine kitchen, top-of-the-line appliances, spotless counters, but no signs of real life. Then he remembered the cans of formula Sophia had sent along from Lumiere. He set them on the counter, filled the kettle, and prepared a bottle. The motions came back to him with unsettling ease, muscle memory from nights long gone with his own daughter. Mia watched closely, perched on a stool like a wary bird. "You know how to do that?" "I used to," Evan admitted, testing the warmth of the milk on his wrist. "It's been a while." He handed her the bottle. Her hands shook slightly as she guided it to Aiden's mouth. The baby latched immediately, sucking greedily, his cries subsiding into the rhythmic sound of swallowing. For the first time that day, Mia's shoulders relaxed. She whispered softly to her brother, stroking his cheek as he drank. Evan leaned against the counter, watching. Something unfamiliar tugged in his chest, the sight of devotion too raw to ignore. When Aiden finished, Mia burped him carefully, patting his tiny back. She looked up at Evan, eyes glassy. "Thank you." The words were simple, but the weight behind them was enormous. Evan cleared his throat. "Come on." He needs a proper place to sleep. He led her to a guest room down the hall. It was sterile, unused, white sheets, minimalist furniture. He fetched a basket, lined it with blankets, and placed it near the bed. Not a crib, not yet, but safer than a street corner. Mia laid Aiden inside, her hand lingering on his chest as his breathing slowed into sleep. Then, finally, she climbed onto the bed. Her shoes dangled off the edge, but she was too tired to care. Evan stood in the doorway, arms crossed, unsure of what to do with the ache swelling in his chest. For a year he had come home to silence. Tonight, the quiet was different. It held the sound of two children breathing. Mia's eyes fluttered open one last time. "You won't send us away?" Evan shook his head. "Rest. We'll figure it out tomorrow." Her lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile before sleep claimed her. Evan stayed in the doorway long after, listening to the small, steady rhythm of Aiden's breath, the soft sigh of Mia drifting into dreams. For the first time in months, he did not dread the night. He felt something else. A fragile ember, small but undeniable. Not redemption, not yet, but the beginning of hope. Morning light spilled across the glass walls of the Whitaker residence, painting long bars of gold onto the concrete floors. Evan had not slept much. He had spent the night drifting between the guest room and his own, listening for every sound Aiden made, glancing at the clock, making mental notes each time the baby stirred. At 7, Sophia Park arrived carrying 2 bags of groceries and a thermos of coffee. She glanced around the immaculate kitchen now cluttered with bottles, cans of formula, and hastily scribbled notes. "Well," she said, setting down the bags, "this place finally looks like someone actually lives here." Evan gave a tired smile. "It's organized chaos." Mia sat at the counter, pencil in hand, writing in the logbook Dr. Harris had left. She looked serious, her tongue pressed against her teeth in concentration. "He ate 4 ounces at 5:30, she reported. Then wet diaper. Then he burped really loud. Sophia chuckled. "That's a good sign." Evan pulled out a chair for himself. "Dr. Harris said CPS will want to see stability within 72 hours. Feeding logs, safe sleep setup, medical oversight, all documented. If we don't meet that standard, they'll intervene." "Then we don't give them an excuse," Sophia replied. Harper Reed arrived mid-morning, brisk as ever. She spread legal forms across the dining table, the glossy surface now transformed into a planning desk. "Here's the reality," she said. "You have 72 hours to show that this is not charity, not impulse, but a sustainable arrangement. CPS will visit, unannounced. They'll check the environment, your records, and your ability to meet both children's needs. That means we need structure." Evan leaned forward. "We already started the log." Mia proudly pushed the notebook toward Harper. The lawyer scanned the crooked handwriting, the timestamps carefully underlined. "This is excellent. Judges don't expect 8-year-olds to be record keepers. This will show responsibility." Mia blushed but straightened in her chair. "Good," Harper continued. "Now, equipment, car seat, crib, childproofing. CPS looks for hazards, open outlets, unsafe bedding, unlocked cabinets. You'll need to prove the house is infant-ready." Evan nodded. "I've already ordered a crib and monitor. They'll be delivered today." "Perfect. And one more thing," Harper said. "You'll need to file for temporary guardianship immediately. Without that, CPS has legal authority to place the children elsewhere." Mia's hand tightened around the notebook. Her eyes darted toward Evan. He met her gaze, steady. "We'll file today, I promise." By afternoon, the house buzzed with activity. A delivery crew carried in boxes, crib parts, a changing table, safety gates. Evan directed them with the precision of a CEO running a merger. "Nursery down the hall," he said. Monitor installed near the outlet. Gate at the top of the stairs. No loose blankets. Mia followed with wide eyes, clutching screws and tiny tools, eager to help. "Can I put the mobile together?" she asked. Evan hesitated, then handed her the pieces. "Careful with the clips." Together, they assembled a nursery that no longer looked like a spare room, but a place meant for a child. The crib stood against the wall, a soft blue sheet tucked tightly across the mattress. Aiden stirred in his basket, watching as though he sensed the space being made for him. When the last gate clicked into place, Mia stepped back proudly. "It looks real," she whispered. "It is real," Evan answered. That evening, Casey Miller from CPS arrived unannounced. Her navy coat was damp from the rain, her clipboard balanced against her arm. She walked through the door with a brisk professionalism that made the air tighten. "Mr. Whitaker," she greeted. "Unscheduled home visit. I'll need to inspect." Evan gestured toward the hallway. "Of course, please." She moved through each room with sharp eyes, noting safety features. She tugged on the crib rails, checked the mattress fit, examined the harness on the new car seat. In the kitchen, she looked at the formula stacked neatly on the counter and the sanitized bottles drying beside the sink. "And records?" she asked. Mia stepped forward with her notebook, holding it like a shield. "I wrote everything down. See?" Casey blinked, clearly surprised. She read through the pages, her expression softening despite herself. "You did this?" Mia nodded. "Every feeding, every diaper." Casey closed the notebook gently. "That's impressive." But then her eyes sharpened again. "Mr. Whitaker, have you filed for guardianship yet?" "Harper Reed is filing as we speak," Evan said firmly. Casey made a note on her clipboard. "Without that petition, CPS still has authority. I'll need confirmation by tomorrow." Mia's shoulders stiffened. Her gaze flicked nervously to Evan. He placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "It's being done. You're safe here." Casey gave one final nod, then left, her coat disappearing into the misty night. After she was gone, silence settled again. Mia leaned against the counter, clutching her notebook. "She didn't look like she believed us." Evan crouched, so his eyes were level with hers. "That's her job, but we'll give her no reason to doubt. We'll keep the logs, follow the plan, and when the judge sees it, they'll know you belong here." Mia searched his face, her voice small. "You won't let them take him, right?" Evan's chest tightened. He thought of the words he had spoken the night before, of the vow he had made in the hospital. He chose not to repeat them again, but instead drew her into a steady embrace. Actions, not words, would prove the promise now. Later, after Mia had drifted to sleep in her bed beside Aiden's crib, Evan sat alone at the dining table. The feeding log lay open before him, pencil resting on the page. He filled in the last line of the night. 9:00 p.m. 5 AUZ formula, wet diaper, settled. He closed the book gently, staring at the neat handwriting that was both childish and resolute. It struck him. In this house of glass and steel, stability wasn't built by architecture or wealth. It was being built line by line, ounce by ounce, by a little girl who refused to let her brother slip through the cracks, and by a man who, for the first time in years, was willing to fight for something beyond himself. The house had settled into uneasy rhythm. For 2 nights, Aiden's breathing had stayed even, his hunger met on schedule, his diapers carefully logged in Mia's neat handwriting. Evan began to believe, just barely, that order could hold back chaos. But storms rarely announce themselves. At 1:43 a.m., Evan woke to a sound that didn't belong. He had placed the bassinet beside his bed, a habit born of vigilance. Now, through the darkness, he heard it. a ragged wheeze, too shallow, too fast. He leaned over quickly. Aiden's tiny chest rose and fell with effort, each inhale a battle. The baby's forehead glistened with sweat, heat radiating from his skin. Evan grabbed the thermometer, slid it under the infant's arm. The numbers blinked red, 38.8 degrees C. His pulse quickened. RSV, respiratory syncytial virus, was sweeping through Seattle that season. Dr. Harris's warning echoed in his head. If his lungs weaken further, even a mild infection could be dangerous. From the doorway, Mia appeared, hair tousled, eyes wide with panic.
"He sounds funny," she whispered. "Like Mama did before she—"
Her voice cracked. Evan didn't let her finish.
"Get your shoes."
"Mia, we're going to the hospital." The drive through the rain-slick streets was a blur of stoplights and fear. Aiden whimpered faintly in the car seat, his cries weaker than usual. Mia sat in the back, her hands clasped tight, whispering prayers she had learned from no one in particular. At Seattle Children's Hospital, the automatic doors parted with a rush of sterile air. Evan carried the baby inside, his voice brisk but trembling at the edges. 6 months, febrile respiratory distress, possible RSV. The triage nurse took one look at Aiden's flushed face and ushered them through. Within minutes, monitors beeped steadily, pulse oximeter on his foot, oxygen tubing near his nose, stethoscope pressed to his chest. Numbers flickered on the screen, oxygen saturation hovering lower than normal, but not yet critical. Mia clutched Evan's arm, her eyes fixed on the wires.
"They'll take him, won't they? CPS? They'll say I failed."
Her words broke through his carefully maintained armor. He crouched beside her, forcing her to meet his eyes. "No," he said, voice firm enough to shake the air. "You did not fail. You kept him alive. You brought him this far. And listen to me, Mia." He placed his hand over hers, steady, deliberate. "He is not going to die, and you are not going to be alone, not while I'm here." The words carried the full weight of his grief, his guilt, and his determination. This was not corporate assurance. It was the vow of a father forged in crisis. Mia buried her face against his shoulder and sobbed. For the first time, she let the fear out. Evan held her, his jaw set, his heart hammering against the truth of his promise. Hours blurred beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. Nurses suctioned Aiden's airway, administered IV fluids, monitored vitals. His tiny chest continued to strain, but slowly, gradually, the numbers improved. His oxygen saturation rose point by point. The fever, dampened by medication, began to ease. Dr. Harris arrived just before dawn, her hair pulled back, fatigue etched into her face. She examined the infant, her movements calm and efficient. "Bronchiolitis," she confirmed, "but mild to moderate. No ICU admission necessary. He'll stay here for observation, then home with strict instructions. You caught it early." Relief loosened the iron bands around Evan's chest. He exhaled, long and heavy, then glanced at Mia. She had fallen asleep curled in the chair beside him, her small hand still gripping the edge of Aiden's blanket as though letting go meant losing him forever. "You did the right thing," Dr. Harris said quietly, scribbling notes. Evan nodded. "She thought she failed." "Children who carry too much responsibility often do," Dr. Harris replied. "But you were here. That matters." By sunrise, the crisis had passed. Aiden's breathing, though still raspy, no longer rattled. His fever receded to safe levels. Nurses prepared discharge papers, outlining fluid intake, fever monitoring, return precautions. Evan listened carefully, memorizing every instruction. He signed the forms with the same precision he once used for billion-dollar contracts. But this signature mattered more than any deal he had ever closed. They left the hospital into a pale, rain-washed dawn. The city was waking, commuters filing into buses, baristas lifting metal grates to open cafes. Evan carried the car seat to the car, Mia at his side. She looked up at him, her face pale with exhaustion but lit with a fragile hope. "He's really going to be okay?" "Yes," Evan said, buckling the car seat. "Because we'll keep him safe. Together." She leaned against him, nodding slowly. For the first time since her mother's disappearance, she allowed herself to believe safety was possible. Back at South Lake Union, Evan placed Aiden gently in his crib. The baby stirred, then settled, chest rising in slow, steady rhythm. The monitor hummed beside him, a quiet guardian. Mia collapsed onto the bed next to the crib, too tired to change clothes. She pulled the blanket up to her chin, eyes fixed on her brother until sleep claimed her. Evan sat in the chair between them, watching both children breathe. The house was silent except for their fragile, life-affirming rhythm. He leaned back, his promise still echoing in his ears. "He is not going to die. You are not going to be alone. Not while I'm here." It was a vow that could not be broken. Not by courts, not by systems, not by the shadows of grief that had haunted him for a year. For the first time, the silence of his home was no longer emptiness. It was a watchful silence, filled with purpose, as dawn spilled new light through the glass walls. The morning after Aiden's fever scare, the Whitaker residence looked less like a penthouse and more like a command center. Coffee steamed in half-empty mugs. Aiden slept in the crib delivered overnight, its white slats gleaming in the corner of the nursery. And in the dining room, the long table had become a battlefield of paper, guardianship petitions, CPS forms, medical notes. Harper Reed, her hair swept into a practical knot, shuffled through the stack with the precision of a surgeon. "We have no time to lose," she said. "If you want to protect them, this petition for temporary guardianship has to be filed today at King County Superior Court." Evan leaned against the table, arms folded, exhaustion written into the lines of his face. "Draft whatever needs drafting, I'll sign it." "Not just sign." Harper tapped a finger on the paper. "You'll need to testify. CPS will argue stability, long-term capacity, and your ability to prioritize children over corporate obligations. You'll have to prove this isn't impulse." Evan gave a dry laugh. "Impulse doesn't look like feeding schedules at 2 a.m. and emergency room visits at dawn. It looks like something else entirely." Mia sat nearby with her notebook, carefully updating the log. She looked up with wide eyes. "What's testify mean?" Harper softened her tone. "It means you tell the judge the truth about what you're doing for Aiden. And for you. That you're keeping him safe." Mia clutched the notebook tighter. "Then we'll show her this. I wrote everything down." Harper nodded, impressed. "That notebook may speak louder than any lawyer." By midday, Evan's living room buzzed with activity. A contractor drilled safety gates into place. Sophia supervised, wiping flour from her hands after rushing from the restaurant to help. The bassinet had been replaced with a full crib, the monitor flashing softly on the dresser. Evan tested the monitor himself, pressing buttons, listening for the soft crackle of Aiden's breathing through the receiver. He moved the crib closer to his own bed that evening, unwilling to leave the infant down the hall. When Sophia raised a brow, he answered simply, "I need to hear him breathe." It was not a promise spoken aloud, but an act of vigilance, the kind of quiet assurance that words could never carry. That afternoon, CPS arrived again. Casey Miller stood in the doorway, clipboard under one arm, expression practiced and neutral. She walked the rooms slowly, noting the new crib, the baby monitor, the safety locks. Upgrades are in place, she observed. That's progress. Evan inclined his head. You'll get Dr. Harris's documentation by tomorrow. Aiden's weight, his vitals, everything. Casey's gaze swept over the dining table stacked with forms. And the guardianship petition? Filed this morning, Harper answered crisply, stepping forward. Judge Kim has already set a preliminary hearing. Casey jotted notes, then crouched down near Mia. And how are you doing? Mia hugged the notebook to her chest. I'm helping. I keep track of everything. He drank 7 ounces last time. And he laughed when I tickled his toes. Casey's expression flickered, almost soft. She rose, tucking the clipboard under her arm. Children don't usually smile in my visits. That's worth more than you know. But as she left, her voice carried the weight of warning. Petition or not, CPS will keep monitoring. Don't forget, legal authority lies with the court, not you. The door shut behind her, leaving silence in its wake. Mia's shoulders sagged. She still thinks they might take him. Evan knelt beside her. Instead of repeating the vow he had already given, he adjusted the blanket around her, tucking it with steady hands. He didn't speak, but his presence was answer enough. The next day dawned gray over downtown Seattle. Evan stood in the King County Superior Court, Harper at his side. The marble floors gleamed beneath fluorescent lights, the air humming with clerks and clients. Mia sat on a bench outside the courtroom with Sophia. Aiden nestled against her shoulder. She peeked through the doorway, eyes wide as Evan approached the bench. Judge Rachel Kim presided, her black robe crisp, her gaze sharp but not unkind. Mr. Whitaker, she said, glancing over the petition, you're requesting temporary guardianship of 2 minors to prevent CPS placement. Do you understand the responsibility you are assuming? I do, Evan replied firmly. The CPS attorney raised an eyebrow. With respect, Your Honor, Mr. Whitaker is CEO of a multinational corporation. His obligations are vast. Guardianship requires not wealth but presence. Can he truly provide that? Harper rose. Your Honor, presence is exactly what my client has provided. In 72 hours, he has managed medical crises, maintained feeding schedules, and secured a safe environment. Dr. Harris will testify to Aiden's improvement, and Mia herself has documented care in meticulous detail. Judge Kim considered the logbook Harper submitted. She scanned Mia's careful handwriting, the rows of times and ounces. A faint smile touched her lips before she masked it with judicial gravity. This matter will proceed to full hearing, she declared. In the meantime, I grant temporary guardianship to Mr. Whitaker, with CPS oversight and weekly medical reporting. The siblings are not to be separated without further order of this court. The gavel tapped once, sharp as a heartbeat. Outside the courtroom, Mia ran to Evan, throwing her arms around his waist. We get to stay? For now, he said, smoothing her hair. We stay together. Her face brightened with cautious relief. Aiden stirred in Sophia's arms, letting out a small squeak that drew a laugh from Mia. That night, back in South Lake Union, Evan set the crib beside his own bed. Aiden slept soundly, his breaths soft and steady. Evan sat awake in the chair beside him, one hand resting on the rail. He didn't speak, didn't vow. He simply watched, hour after hour, as if keeping vigil could hold the world at bay. In the silence, he understood something new. Fatherhood was not a promise made once. It was 1,000 small choices, repeated through action. And for the first time, he was willing to make every one of them. Rain slid down the windows of Evan Whitaker's penthouse in restless streaks, blurring the lights of South Lake Union into a watercolor of gold and gray. The house was quiet, but not empty. Aiden breathed softly in his crib beside Evan's bed, and Mia, at last, slept deeply in the room down the hall. For the first time in days, both children were safe under one roof. But safety was fragile. Guardianship papers were temporary, a shield made of paper and signatures. To secure their future, Evan needed more than legal filings. He needed answers. Where was their mother, and why had she disappeared? The next morning, Harper Reed arrived with another stack of documents. Her tone was brisk, but beneath it lay something gentler. She, too, had grown invested in these children. "We traced what we could," she explained, sliding the files across the table. "Angela Carter, 31 years old. She delivered Aiden at Harborview Medical Center 6 months ago. Complications after birth, postpartum hemorrhage. She survived, was discharged 2 weeks later. After that, nothing." Evan flipped through the records. The notes were clinical. Vital signs, transfusion levels, discharge summaries. But in the margins he saw faint echoes of a life unraveling. No follow-ups, no address, no employer. Harper shook her head. The social worker flagged her as high risk, housing instability, no family support. But the file was closed when she stopped answering calls. She vanished before CPS could intervene. Mia sat at the table, clutching a crayon. She had been coloring quietly, but at the sound of her mother's name, her hand froze. The blue line she had been drawing bled into a blotch. "She said she'd come back," Mia whispered, eyes fixed on the paper. "She promised." The words cut through the room like broken glass. Evan placed a steady hand over hers. He didn't try to correct her, didn't tell her promises sometimes broke. He simply let her know she had been heard. That afternoon, Evan drove to Harborview with Sophia at his side. The hospital's concrete tower loomed against the gray sky, its windows fogged with condensation. Inside, the halls smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee. Dr. Chen, a physician in internal medicine, met them in a narrow conference room. He flipped through Angela Carter's file, his expression weary. "She was weak after delivery," he explained. "We wanted follow-ups, iron therapy, monitoring for depression, but she never came back." "Did anyone track her down?" Evan asked. Dr. Chen sighed. "We flagged her for social work, but caseloads are overwhelming. Families slip through the cracks. If she was unhoused, she may have sought shelter, or not at all. Or worse," Evan muttered. Sophia reached for his arm. "Don't go there yet." Evan nodded but said nothing. His mind, sharpened by years of corporate battles, could not ignore the pattern. Systemic scars left by underfunding, by bureaucracy too slow to catch the people falling fastest. When they left Harborview, the drizzle had thickened into rain. Evan stood under the hospital awning, watching the city blur, and thought, "The system is built to fracture families. If I don't fight, it will fracture this one too." The next blow came 2 days later. Casey Miller from CPS returned, her expression heavier than usual. She sat at the dining table, opening a manila envelope with careful fingers. "There's been a petition filed," she said. "A private foster family in Pierce County. They're requesting adoption of Aiden Carter specifically." Mia's chair screeched across the floor. "No!" she cried, jumping to her feet. "They can't take him! He's mine! Mama told me I had to keep him safe!" Her voice cracked, fierce and terrified at once. Casey raised her hands, trying to calm her. "Mia, it's not decided. The petition argues that Aiden's age makes him highly adoptable. Infants bond more easily. They claim separating him from you may serve his best interest." Mia's small fists clenched. "Best interest? That's a lie." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "He won't even sleep without me singing. He needs me." Evan rose slowly, his height casting a shadow over the table. He didn't shout. He didn't vow aloud. Instead, he reached for Aiden, lifting the baby into his arms. The infant squirmed, then settled against his chest, soothed by the familiar rhythm of Evan's breathing. He looked at Casey, his voice low, controlled, and immovable. "Tell the court I oppose. File whatever stay order is necessary. These children will not be separated." Casey studied him for a long moment. Something flickered in her eyes. Not just professionalism, but recognition of conviction. She nodded. "I'll document your opposition. But you'll need more than passion. You'll need evidence. Growth charts, medical testimony, educational support. Build your case stronger than theirs." "We will," Evan said simply. That night, Evan stood at the crib, watching Aiden's chest rise and fall. Mia lay curled on the bed nearby, clutching her brother's worn blanket even in sleep. He thought of Lily, his own daughter, lost in a moment he could never undo. He thought of Angela Carter, a mother who vanished under the weight of illness and poverty. And he thought of the faceless foster petition, the language of best interest that masked a brutal truth. Systems cared more for convenience than for bonds forged in survival. Evan rested a hand lightly on the crib rail. He didn't whisper promises into the night this time. He didn't need to. The determination thrummed inside him, silent but absolute. No judge, no system, no bureaucrat will tear these children apart, not while I have breath in me. It was not spoken, but it was real. And in the stillness of that room, as rain tapped against the glass, the vow carried heavier than any words could. The courthouse on 3rd Avenue loomed against a sky the color of wet concrete. Rain slicked the sidewalks, umbrellas bobbed in the crowd, and Evan Whitaker felt the weight of every drop as he guided Mia up the stone steps. She clutched her notebook like a shield. Beside them, Sophia carried Aiden in a sling across her chest, the infant dozing but occasionally coughing softly. Inside, the air smelled of paper and polish. Security lines shuffled forward. Harper Reed walked with brisk confidence, her briefcase swinging at her side. "Remember," she said, lowering her voice, "today isn't about money or influence. It's about credibility. Show them you're steady, that you can give these children more than walls and formula." "I know," Evan replied. He straightened his tie, but his eyes drifted toward Mia, who stared at the floor, her small hand gripping his sleeve. The courtroom was modest, wooden benches, fluorescent lights, the faint hum of a heating vent. Judge Rachel Kim presided, her robe black and crisp, her gaze sharp but not unkind. At the petitioner's table sat Evan and Harper. Across the aisle, the foster agency's representative shuffled a stack of files, her lips pressed thin. CPS officer Casey Miller occupied the center row, neutral, clipboard ready. The clerk called the case. In the matter of temporary guardianship of minors Mia Carter and Aiden Carter. Judge Kim nodded. "Proceed." Harper rose first. She spoke with the calm authority of someone who knew when to strike and when to let silence work in her favor. "Your Honor, we are here to affirm Mr. Whitaker's petition for temporary guardianship. In the weeks since these children entered his care, both have shown remarkable improvement. The infant, Aiden, has gained weight and stabilized after a respiratory infection. His medical team, led by Dr. Emily Harris of Seattle Children's Hospital, will testify to his progress. His sister Mia is now enrolled in school under McKinney-Vento protections, receiving consistent support and counseling. This is not a temporary shelter. This is a home." She placed a folder on the bench. "We submit documentation of medical oversight, school enrollment, and home safety compliance. We ask that this guardianship be recognized so these siblings may remain together." Judge Kim flipped briefly through the papers, then gestured toward the opposing side. The foster agency representative stood, her tone clipped. "Your Honor, while we commend Mr. Whitaker's efforts, parenting is not a sprint. It is a marathon. Infants, particularly those medically fragile, require trained, licensed foster care. We have a certified family in Pierce County ready to adopt Aiden permanently. While separation is regrettable, it may serve his best interest long term. His sister, though resilient, complicates placement. At those words, Mia shot to her feet. "No!" Her voice rang across the courtroom, high and trembling. "He's my brother. He won't sleep without me. You can't take him away." Gasps rustled through the gallery. Evan quickly placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, guiding her back into her seat. He whispered, "Let us fight for you." Judge Kim's gavel tapped once. "Order, please. Young lady, I understand your fear, but you must let your advocate speak." Mia sat down again, tears brimming in her eyes. The next witness was Dr. Emily Harris. She stepped to the stand in her hospital coat, stethoscope still looped around her neck. Her voice was calm but resolute. Aiden Carter arrived at Seattle Children's underweight, anemic, and in respiratory distress. Since Mr. Whitaker assumed care, his growth trajectory has improved steadily. He responds to structured feeding, consistent monitoring, and above all, the presence of his sister. Separating them would not only risk his progress but introduce psychological trauma. For Mia, the bond is protective. For Aiden, it is stabilizing. My medical opinion, they must remain together. The foster representative attempted to counter. "Doctor, are you suggesting that foster families cannot provide stability?" "I am suggesting," Dr. Harris replied evenly, "that stability has already been established here. To disrupt it now would be reckless." A murmur rippled across the room. Finally, Harper called Sophia Park. Dressed simply, her hair pulled back from the kitchen rush, Sophia spoke from the heart. "I've seen Mr. Whitaker leave meetings to rock a baby at 2 a.m. I've seen him study formula instructions with more focus than he gives to stock reports. These children are not charity to him. They're family. And if you want proof of what separation does, look at me. My own brother was split from me in foster care when I was 12. We never found each other again. Don't let that happen here." Her voice caught, but she steadied herself. The silence in the room deepened. When it was his turn, Evan stood. His voice was measured, deliberate. "Your Honor, I've spent my life in boardrooms fighting for mergers, profits, control, and none of it matters if I can't protect 2 children who walked into my world asking only for food. I am not perfect, but I am present, and I will continue to be." Judge Kim leaned back, steepling her fingers. She studied the documents, then the children, then the man standing at the table. This court recognizes the competing arguments: licensed foster stability versus demonstrated guardianship. But evidence shows clear improvement under Mr. Whitaker's care, and the sibling bond is undeniable. She turned to Mia, whose face was pale but steady, then to Aiden, sleeping soundly against Sophia's chest. Finally, she looked at Evan. "This court grants the petition for temporary guardianship to Mr. Whitaker. The order is effective immediately, subject to continued CPS oversight and regular medical reporting. The siblings will not be separated." The gavel struck. Mia gasped, covering her mouth with both hands. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Evan closed his eyes, a breath of relief breaking through his composure. Outside the courtroom, Casey Miller approached. Her clipboard was tucked under her arm, her tone professional but softer than before. "You'll still be monitored, Mr. Whitaker. Regular visits, compliance checks. But, for what it's worth, this feels right." Mia threw her arms around Evan's waist. "We get to stay?" He crouched down, pulling her close. "We stay." And for the first time, she smiled, without fear. The ruling at King County had changed everything. Papers had been signed, gavel had struck, and for the first time, Evan Whitaker brought Mia and Aiden home not under threat of separation, but with the court's blessing. Temporary though it was, it meant they belonged. That evening, the house no longer echoed with uncertainty. Movers carried boxes into the second floor, following Evan's instructions. Contractors hammered softly, adjusting shelves, securing gates, painting walls with muted colors chosen not for style, but for comfort. Mia stood in the middle of what had once been Evan's sealed office. Dust motes floated through shafts of light spilling from the windows, revealing Lily's old drawings still tacked to the corkboard. Rainbows, stick figures, a crooked house, remnants of a little girl's imagination that had stayed untouched since the day she was lost. Evan's chest tightened as he unlocked the door. He had avoided this room for a year, treating it like a tomb. But now, with Mia holding Aiden on her hip, he knew it could no longer remain a shrine to grief. "This was my daughter's," he said softly. "She used to spend hours here drawing. I thought I'd never be able to open it again." Mia walked carefully across the room, her shoes squeaking faintly against the polished wood. She traced a finger over one of the drawings. "It looks like what I draw," she murmured. Evan nodded. "I want this to be your room now, both of you. A place to feel safe." Her eyes widened. "Really? Really?" The next day, Sophia arrived with bags of supplies, bedding patterned with stars, curtains in cheerful colors, boxes of crayons, and a corkboard of Mia's own. Together, they pinned up her drawings alongside Lily's. Two worlds, one lost and one beginning, now shared the same wall. Mia stood back and studied them. For the first time, she saw herself not as a visitor in someone else's house, but as part of its story. The transformation of the house didn't stop with one room. Evan converted his old office into a nursery that met every recommendation Dr. Harris had listed. The crib stood sturdy with a fitted mattress. Monitors blinked gently, sensors humming with steady reassurance. Shelves were stocked with diapers, wipes, formula, and tiny bottles arranged in neat rows. Mia watched him set the final monitor, her face bright with wonder. "It's like a real baby store." Evan smiled faintly. "That's the point. He deserves it." The once cold penthouse, designed for steel and glass impressions, now bore signs of life. Toys scattered near the couch, a blanket tossed across the armrest, a mobile spinning above the crib. It was no longer just Evan's home. The change spread beyond the walls as well. With Harper's guidance, Evan announced the Whitaker Foundation's expansion into a new initiative, the Seattle Infant Food Bank Partnership. Standing at a press conference beside pediatricians and social workers, he spoke not of mergers or profits, but of hunger. "When I first met Mia and Aiden," he told the cameras, "they were hungry, vulnerable, and invisible. No child in this city should ever be invisible. Today, we pledge resources so that no infant goes without formula, no child goes without care." The story spread quickly across local media. Whitaker CEO turns foundation toward infant care. For once, the headlines carried not numbers, but compassion. Back at home, Mia had clipped one of the articles and taped it to her corkboard. "See?" she told Aiden proudly. "That's our family. We help babies now." Life fell into rhythm. Mia started her first week at Lowell Elementary in Capitol Hill. On the morning of her first day, she hesitated at the gate, clutching Evan's hand. "What if they don't like me?" she whispered. "They'll like you," Evan said. "And if they don't, it won't change a thing." "You'll still have us." She studied him carefully, then nodded, walking into the classroom with her backpack nearly as big as she was. Evan stayed long enough to see her take a seat, straighten her shoulders, and open her notebook. Pride swelled in him, pride not of achievement, but of courage. Meanwhile, Aiden continued his catch-up immunizations. Dr. Harris charted his growth, showing steady improvement. His cheeks filled, his cries grew stronger, and by the end of the month, his weight reached the 25th percentile. "He's thriving," Dr. Harris said during a checkup. "And you can see the bond. When his sister's voice enters the room, he turns toward her. That kind of stability is powerful." Evan glanced at Mia, who was humming softly to calm her brother after the injection. "He knows she's here," he said. "And he knows you are too," Dr. Harris added quietly. One evening, as twilight settled over Lake Union, Evan stood in the kitchen with Sophia. She stirred soup on the stove, the smell of garlic and broth filling the air. Mia sat nearby coloring, and Aiden babbled from his playpen, waving tiny fists. "Do you realize," Sophia said, "this house has more life in it than it ever has? If your board walked in now, they wouldn't even recognize you." "Maybe that's the point," Evan replied. "For too long it was a mausoleum. Now," he trailed off, eyes settling on Mia, who was taping her drawing to the wall, chanting. The picture showed 3 figures holding hands beneath a blue sky, drawn in bold crayon strokes. Above them, she had written in block letters, "Family." Evan's chest tightened. For months, he had thought of that word as loss. Tonight, it was something else entirely. Later, after the children were asleep, he wandered back into the transformed office. The wall of drawings glowed faintly in the lamplight, Lily's rainbows beside Mia's stars. He reached up, touching the edges of the paper, and whispered to himself, though no one could hear, "We're whole again." For the first time, the house felt whole again. Spring sunlight broke through the clouds over Seattle, rare and startling, scattering petals from the cherry trees along 3rd Avenue. It was the first warm morning in months, yet Evan Whitaker's chest carried the chill of anticipation. This was not another preliminary hearing. Today was final. The King County Superior Court bustled with attorneys, clerks, and families. Evan arrived in a tailored gray suit, Mia at his side in a simple blue dress, and Sophia carrying Aiden bundled against her shoulder. Harper Reed walked ahead with her briefcase, her stride sharp with purpose. Mia clutched Evan's hand tightly. "Are they going to try to take him again?" "Today decides everything," Evan answered gently. "But whatever happens, we face it together." The courtroom was brighter than it had seemed weeks before, sunlight streaming through high windows. Judge Rachel Kim presided once more, her expression grave but watchful. The clerk called the case. In the matter of permanent guardianship and adoption of minors, Mia Carter and Aiden Carter. Evan felt Mia's grip tighten. He gave her hand a squeeze in return. Harper rose first. "Your Honor, since the temporary order was granted, both children have thrived. Aiden has moved from the 3rd percentile in weight to the 25th. He is fully immunized, medically stable, and bonded strongly with his caregiver. Mia is enrolled at Lowell Elementary, with steady attendance and counseling support. This is not a stopgap. This is permanence. We petition the court to grant permanent guardianship and adoption to Mr. Whitaker." She placed a binder on the bench, filled with medical charts, school records, and CPS reports. The foster agency representative rose slowly. Her arguments were subdued, her words thinner than before. "We acknowledge the progress. Still, we must question sustainability. Mr. Whitaker is a CEO with extraordinary responsibilities. Can he truly provide daily, hands-on care over years?" All eyes turned to Evan. He stood adjusting his tie and stepped forward. His voice was calm but resonant, carrying not the tone of a corporate titan, but of a man speaking from the marrow of his life. "Your Honor, I spent years believing success meant contracts and towers of glass. I built a life that could weather any market storm. But when I lost my daughter, I learned that no skyscraper can fill an empty home." He turned, glancing at Mia and Aiden. Mia sat upright, eyes locked on him. Aiden gurgled softly, clutching Sophia's necklace. The night I met these children, they were starving. But they gave me something I had lost: purpose. I have not delegated their care to anyone. I have fed at 2 in the morning, counted ounces, sat in hospital corridors until dawn. These children are not obligations. They are not symbols. They are family. He paused, letting the silence settle. And I will keep showing up for them, not as a CEO, but as their father. The courtroom hushed. Even the foster representative lowered her gaze. Judge Kim exhaled slowly, folding her hands. This court has considered the testimony, the medical records, and the progress made. It finds clear and convincing evidence that Mr. Whitaker has provided consistent, nurturing, and stable care. The sibling bond is inseparable, and their best interest lies in remaining together. She lifted the gavel. Permanent guardianship and adoption are hereby granted to Mr. Evan Whitaker. The gavel struck once, echoing like a bell across the chamber. Mia gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Tears spilled over her cheeks as she whispered, "Forever." Evan bent, wrapping her in his arms. "Forever," he said, voice breaking. Sophia handed him Aiden, and he lifted the baby high, pressing his cheek against soft skin. Aiden squealed in delight, a sound like sunlight itself. Outside the courthouse, cherry blossoms fluttered down around them. The city moved on with its usual rush, but for their small group, time slowed. They had walked in as petitioners. They walked out as a family. That afternoon, they gathered at Gasworks Park, overlooking Lake Union. The air smelled faintly of grass and damp iron from the old gas plant towers that rose against the sky. Families flew kites, couples strolled hand in hand, and the water glittered with boats gliding by. Evan spread a blanket on the slope of the hill. Mia skipped ahead, her star-shaped hair clip glinting in the sunlight. She twirled once, laughing, her joy louder than the gulls circling overhead. Aiden lay on the blanket, fascinated by the drifting petals, gurgling as he reached for them. Sophia snapped photos, capturing the unlikeliest family framed against the Seattle skyline. The breeze tugged at Evan's suit jacket, but he barely noticed. His eyes stayed fixed on the children. Mia ran back and threw her arms around him. "We're really a family now, aren't we?" He kissed the top of her head. "Yes, Mia, we are." He lifted Aiden into his arms, the baby giggling wildly. Mia leaned against him, her small hand wrapped firmly around his. Together they looked out at the lake, the city rising behind them, the future wide open before them. The sun dipped lower, turning the water to molten gold. For the first time since Lily's death, Evan's heart felt not fractured but full. He had thought his life's story was written in loss. Now, with Mia's laughter ringing in his ears and Aiden's small hand gripping his tie, he knew a new chapter had begun. He whispered the words softly, carried away on the breeze. "Our home isn't empty anymore. Thank you for walking with us through this journey of love and second chances." If this story touched your heart, please subscribe so we can keep sharing more stories of hope, healing, and family.